Hello everyone, welcome to Cellopedia. This is Maxim. Today we will talk about pizzicato, another Italian word we will have to learn. That's such a long, beautiful word. Some of my younger students think that this is a way too long word to remember. And then I ask them if you like pizza, and you can bet they do. So, if you can remember pizza, you can remember pizzicato. You can think pizza has to be cut and to get a wonderful slice of it. Pizzicato. Pizzicato translates to English to pluck, which I don't think is very inspiring way to think about it. Pluck, pluck, pluck. There is a lot of beauty in the sound of pizzicato. It has very strong and clear beginning and then long, gracefully dying away tail. The sound of pizzicato is different if you compare to the same note played with the bow . You can hear that it sounds as if there are two different instruments playing this note. This is because that string reacts quite differently when we are using the bow compared to pizzicato. Not to go too far into details, but the sound you hear when you are playing with the bow consists of very different partials compared to pizzicato. Okay, why don't we just try to play pizzicato? I'm sure you already done it. I will be using the page 38 pizzicato exercise in Piatti cello method. I will play it in tempo quarter note 60 and I will use the index finger to pluck a string. What would happen if we would use different finger? Let's try it. This time we will use the middle finger and I will just play first two measures. There is very subtle difference. When you use middle finger, that's bigger, thicker finger, compared to index finger, the sound gets deeper. It's getting more depth. But we can go one step ahead of it and play using thumb. Let's try it. It's quite harder to use thumb, especially when you have to play faster notes. But then you can hear the sound quality is different too. So far, we tried 3 different fingers: index finger, middle finger, and thumb. Well, what would happen if we use one of the same fingers, but if we change the spot we would be using. Say, the previous time I played fairly close to the end of the fingerboard. Now I will play pizzicato somewhere here. Let's see what happens. Again, we are getting different sound quality. This time it's less clear, but somehow it feels easier. A string makes less resistance. So, which way should we do it? I would suggest you to play pizzicato closer to the end of the fingerboard, somewhere here. String makes more resistance, but that will provide a deeper sound. Slightly harder to play, but result will be much better. However, feel free to experiment with the finger you use, or thumb, or exact spot on the string. Like with a bow, we often need different color of the sound. So if you need more subtle, lighter sound, you might want to use index finger and go a little bit higher here. Contrary, if you would like to have very bold, bright sound, you will go as far as possible. Maybe even you will touch the part of the string which has rosin from the bow on it. Or, on top of that, if you use thumb, you will get very different sound. So, depends on the piece you are working on. You will have to find your own way to play pizzicato. Now, let's try to play chords with pizzicato. There are basically two different ways of doing it. When you strum each string in order, usually from the bottom to the top, you can also call it arpeggiato, this way. Or if you try to play all the strings at the same time, pluck them together. This way you will use thumb, index, and middle finger all together. Again, the choice will depend on the music you are performing. Let's play the second line of pizzicato exercise. First, arpeggiato, going from the bottom string to the top. Usually, in this case, we would use the thumb. And then I will play it one more time, trying to play all strings together. And now let's play all the notes in a chord together. You might ask, well, I'm supposed to use 3 fingers, 2 fingers and a thumb. How am I going to play 4 notes chord? Well, when you have to play on 4 strings together, that's kind of like a combination between 2 types of technique. So you quickly strumming or moving thumb between 2 lower strings, and then at the same time you use index finger and middle finger to pluck 2 other strings. Your thumb moves quite quickly, so usually it's not very noticeable that we are not exactly playing 2 bottom notes together. Let me play for you the last chord. My thumb did something like that. Now it's time to play the etude by Sebastian Lee, number 4, where we will have to switch from playing with the bow, arco, to plucking the string, pizzicato. Usually, when you have a long note before you have to switch to pizzicato, you can shorten that note a bit. Say the last measure of the first line, you have dotted half note. You can safely imagine that there is the 8th note rest. So you'll have time to prepare from the bow position to pizzicato. Now, when you switch from pizzicato to arco, you have to be very quick. So you have to roll the bow from this position when you play pizzicato to this position. When you play in an orchestra, sometimes you have very quick changes between bow and pizzicato. In this case, I usually suggest to play first notes of the pizzicato in very improper position, not how we usually play pizzicato, by the turning bow in your fist like this and conveniently holding it, and this way you have your middle finger or index finger available. But rather, you would keep the bow the same way you just using for arco, and if you extend the middle finger, you can still play pizzicato. So let's imagine you have to play quick succession of arco and pizzicato notes. You would never have time to play, to turn the bow back and forth. So then this technique would become very handy. Again, this trick, it's not exactly for those etudes, but you might start trying it, making sure that you have very quick transition from bow to pizzicato. the etude number 4, tempo quarter note 60. Get ready to switches between bow and pizzicato. Did you remember to give yourself enough time to switch from the bow to pizzicato? Right? The end of the first line. 1 and 2 and 3 and... Again, you can safely shorten this dotted half note to 1/8 note and gracefully prepare pizzicato. Otherwise, you might think, okay, it's printed dotted half note, no matter what, I have to do it. First of all, it's impossible. You need to have some time to switch. And then if you give yourself very little time, you will play... And you might miss the pizzicato note altogether. It will look rushed, and that it will be out of context for this music. Now let's work on A minor melodic scale, which is printed right before pizzicato exercises. The melodic scale, minor melodic scale, is the scale where 6th and 7th step are moved half a step higher on the way up. And when you play downwards, you will use regular notes. In A minor scale, F and G will become F sharp and G sharp, but only when you play it on the way up. And now let's play A minor arpeggio. For both scale and arpeggio, we will use harmonic when you play the top A. That means that you are not pressing on the string in a regular way. So string doesn't have to touch to the fingerboard. but you have to touch the string very gently. When I play scales and arpeggio, usually I'm trying to avoid vibrato. And you noticed even when I play etudes, I'm using vibrato very carefully. In scales, vibrato might make it sound better, but it will distract us from paying attention to sound quality and intonation, left-hand precision. And in etudes, very often you will have to work on your technique the same way. So even though some etudes might sound better with vibrato, be very careful using it. The etude number 5 by Kummer, we don't have to use pizzicato until the very last note of the etude. And there I suggest to play arpeggiato, to strum strings. We will play it in the same tempo, quarter note 60. If you like, you can try to play that chord all 3 notes together. Or you can play it a bit quicker. It's all up to you. You are an artist. It's your choice. It was very enjoyable working with you on those pizzicato and bow exercises. I'm sure you will keep practicing, and I hope I will see you again on Cellopedia.